Hello and welcome to the 7th of our brief tutorials on the basics of Inkscape. This time we're going to carry on using the Bezier tool, but we're going to use it to look at two other functions, which are snapping and the grid. So I'm just going to create two boxes. I'll show you what normally happens when you move things around. So when they're created, I press the S key to go into select mode. And now if I just grab it, now, because it hasn't got a fill, I have to grab it quite close to the line. I can move it very precisely close to get them slightly off. Now, if I turn snapping on, so on my computer, snapping is this set of icons down the right-hand side. Depending on the shape and size of your monitor, it may be along the top. So I'm going to turn on the top button, which is enabling snapping, or the % key. And you can see some of the others are now activated and no longer grayed out. Now when I move the rectangle, you can see it's snapped and it says corner to corner. So if the nodes, and the nodes, the different ways of snapping are turned on and off by these different icons, but that's snapping. Now if I actually want to have it close but not touching, I can momentarily override snapping by holding the shift key down. And there it's no longer snapping. So you have to grab it first and be moving it and then hold the shift key down. You can do that, and then if I move it ordinarily, it'll snap. The shift key trick doesn't always work, and I'll explain that later in the session. Okay, I'm now going to turn on the grid, and I'm going to do that by pressing the hash key on the keyboard. It's the easiest of all the quick keys to remember in Inkscape because the hash looks like a grid. So I'm going to turn that on and we can see a grid has appeared. Grid goes off, grid goes on, just by repeating the key. Now, the grid as we've got it, I think is too small for what I want for this tutorial, so I'm going to go into document properties and change it. So you can either look in the file menu, where it's near the bottom, or I prefer to use this icon here, which is like a spanner over a page, and either of those will open up document properties. Sometimes the document properties menu opens right on the far right edge of the document, and if that happens you just have to drag it in. So the third tab along is grids, and I'll just go through the features here. So creation of grids can be rectangular or axonometric, which means a triangular grid, and you can choose the angles, and those are great for doing perspective drawings and engineering drawings and designing snowflakes. Okay, further down we have grid is enabled or not, grid is visible or not. Now I can't imagine wanting it to be enabled and invisible, I'd just get really confused. Snap to visible grid lines only, I'll explain that in a minute. Okay, so grid units currently are pixels and they're spacing 1 x and 1 y. So x is across left to right and y is bottom to top. Now a pixel is a very small thing, so if I turn that into millimetres, that's 0.26 of a millimetre, so it's ridiculously small for my needs. So I'm going to take that up to about 5 millimetres and 5 millimetres. Then we're going to have the colours, so if you've got artwork where blue is confusing, then you can change the colours, and then a major grid line every 5 lines. So you can see on the screen now we've got groups of 5 and a slightly stronger line every 5th smaller line. Okay, so I can just close that. And now I've got a grid, my rectangle is snapping to the grid. Now if I zoom out a little bit, there's a point at which the smaller squares are so small it just doesn't show them, and that's where that setting of snap to visible grid lines only comes in. So it's only going to snap to these rather than before that it'll snap to any of those. Okay, now this is also a good example with creating rectangles where the shift trick I told you for overriding the snapping doesn't work, because normally when I've created a rectangle, here it is, it's snapping to the grid, I can, wherever I've clicked first, the rectangle comes from that first point. But there's another way of doing it, which is to hold shift down, and where you click is actually the centre of the rectangle. Now because shift is already part of the rectangle tool's functions, it doesn't override snapping, so that's one example. There are quite a few of those. Okay, so I'm just going to delete those. So select them all, hit delete. I'm now going to just bring in the Bezier pen. Now I'm using a slightly older version of Inkscape than you might have seen before, because the new version, although it's brilliant in many ways, has quite a few bugs. And the only functional difference for this is that the Bezier tool is slightly further down on the toolbar. It's the same icon though. So I'm going to just create a shape. So I'm just going to drag handle. So this is standard Bezier stuff that you've seen before. I'm going to take that down to there. I'm now going to hit the hash key and turn that grid off because I want a bit more freedom. Oops. I'm going to hold shift down and turn that to a point node. Okay, now I want the bottoms to be level with each other, so I'm going to turn the grid back on again. So that's the sort of way you can just bring in the grid and take it away very effectively. So I'm now going to select this and I want to join them up. So actually I could leave the grid on, but I'm just going to hit Control D to duplicate. Now I can snap them together, duplicate, snap them, duplicate. Okay, I'm just going to turn all these into a group, so Control G, and now I can move them all as one. I'm going to turn the line blue, so that's shift click on a blue icon, and I want the line to be a fair bit thicker. So down at the bottom by the stroke there's a little number, and that's 1 millimeter. So if I right click on that, it brings up a menu of other thicknesses. Okay, it's not the prettiest wave in the world, but what it does do is give us a nice context for our fish. So that's the tutorial I wanted to show you. So you've looked at snapping and the grid and how you can use the two together, and I hope you found it useful, and we'll see you in another session.